the Atlas Outdoor Experience Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Monroe. Let's get it started.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the AO Experience Podcast, where we give you tips, tricks, and ways to better your business. Maybe you're just getting started, or maybe you're a small business trying to grow. So we're here to try to help make things a little bit easier along the way. Today we have none other than Sam Gembel here with us, owner and founder of Atlas Outdoor.
What up, y'all?
Thank you so much for taking the time out again to do this.
You pretty much didn't give me an option today. You're like, dude, I walk back in my office from getting a coffee and there's a full mic set up on the desk. It's kind of like we're doing this today.
It's kind of already done. It's all set up. You can't really, you couldn't do any work on the desk if you tried to.
Exactly.
All right, so let's jump right into it. You have talked a lot recently about Headspace, and we've talked briefly about it here and there, and it makes a lot of sense when you really break it down and think about it. And I think a lot of people are missing out on what they could be doing if they have the proper Headspace. So could you give us an explanation of what that is?
I was one of the people that was missing out on it, and so that's why I'm probably so passionate about it now. But yeah, essentially it's just really in the context that we're going to talk about, and in the context for I think what a lot of people might be missing is, as leaders or as business owners or senior managers or whatever somebody's role might be, we're pulled in many different directions on each and every day. And what people don't understand is the headspace that you're in for the task at hand at that moment in time could be completely different from the next face punch that you're going to experience. And what I mean by that is if you're, if you're dealing with maybe a toxic employee or somebody that or any hard decision that you're going to have to make on that particular day or that particular week, and you're not in the headspace to do that said task, or you've done that said task and then you've got to jump into something completely different because that's what your job description or your task that you have to do requires you to do. The time it takes to change headspaces, it's exhausting. And when you don't have time to pivot into the next thing and then the next thing and then the next thing that you have to do on a daily basis, we can tend to leave the day there's those days that, sometimes you just feel like mentally exhausted by the end of the day. And what you don't realize, and this is that what I had come to the conclusion on, was just I did not have my days filtered out by proper headspace. So I would just, I've always, me, I love to get stuff done, but I would put too many different headspace items into a day. And so what would happen is on certain days of the week, like I would find myself just getting home and my wife would be like, man, all day when you're at work, you're like all in for our team, or you're all in for, somebody that you're coaching or mentoring. But then when you get home and we just want you to be a dad, like you're just checked out. And like I couldn't figure out why, because my days have always been hard since I became an entrepreneur. There's always things that we have to deal with. But I really started to study and journal down what it was that I was doing on a daily basis. And I had figured out that certain days of the week, I had more energy at the end of the day. It's wild when you really start to unpack it. And it wasn't like I was getting more sleep on those nights. It wasn't like I was getting up like 30 minutes later than what I normally do. It was literally all mental. And then when I started to kind of study it and seek out some people that were much smarter and further ahead in the journey than me, and, I'm explaining it to them where I'm just like, man, at the end of these days, I'm just tanked. And I'm walking through my days, and I didn't even have to use other sources to help me figure out what it was. I concluded it on my own, was that I was just having to pivot so many times. And so just, I know that's a long definition of what we're trying to get at here, but really the headspace is just the mindset for the task at hand, the task that you're dealing with on said day or said time or whatever the project is that you're working on.
Yeah, and it's super crucial because, like you said, if you're not in the right headspace, you talk about valuing your time all the time, and I know I bring that up on here a lot, but it's important. And if you value your time, it's important to make your day like you're saying, plan it out, headspace, have the proper headspace for it, so you're valuing your time correctly. And I mean, that makes complete sense as a business owner and anybody that's trying to get into that. Where do you start from? There's a planning process for the whole thing, and if you're not in the right headspace for those things, your time's not being valued the right way.
Yep.
So time boxing, this is something you've brought up a couple times. What exactly is time boxing, and how does that kind of play into Headspace?
Yeah, so for sure. So I'll give you a little backstory to where, like, my early days of trying to get this figured out, but as my platform got bigger and the decisions and the things that I was dealing with on a daily basis got to be larger and more emotions involved, more emotion based sometimes than objective based. I actually was getting pretty good with the time box thing with back when the last real hat that I had wore with Atlas was when I was one of the main salespeople. And so what I would do is I would pick, I would look at, like, obviously the busier parts of the year, you've got more appointments to do more sales, but I had pretty well figured it out to where I could time box 2 days a week to go literally deal with just client stuff. So for 2 days a week, I would start my morning, with meeting clients, and I would end my day with meeting clients. And that's what I would do. I would pack it all day. So usually you have to miss lunch because, the appointments ran over or whatever. But that entire day, I would go deal with just people all day. I wouldn't have a lot of time to take notes, things like that, which is more of the analytical side of sales, which brings up another, part of the whole time boxing and headspace thing. But I would go, 2 days a week, do all my appointments, and then the other 2 days a week, I would use those days to work on my estimates and things like that. And so, the time boxing is really just certain parts of the day when you're going to do certain things, and you eliminate as many distractions as possible on those said days. And, I would give myself 2 hours for each appointment stop, where sometimes, like, really quick, I'd learn the client wasn't going to be a good fit anyway. So now I've got an hour before I need to be to my next one, and I'm not going to start a new task. I'm going to waste it. And so I'm like, man, I really got to get better with, like, trying to figure out, like, pre-qualifying clients. And that was we'll do a whole nother podcast sometime on, identifying the right client. But yeah, really, the time boxing is just setting aside certain times of the day that are kind of your non-negotiables, and you block it out in your calendar. And this is what I'm going to do at this time. And you don't go away from that unless it's literally like a catastrophe that you have to deal with. Like, this is what I'm going to do. And what you'll find is if you tackle your non-negotiables the first part of your day, instead of having to work till 8 or 9 o'clock at night, which you think that you're actually accomplishing stuff because you're working later, really it's because you've delayed things that you should have done earlier in the day, and you're saving it till later. And now you're like, man, I can't end the day until I get this done, when you should have just did that and time boxed those non-negotiables earlier in the day. And so yeah, that's essentially the meaning with time boxing. And we can talk about how I time box my days and do certain things, but maybe we'll close the podcast today with that. So you guys got to keep listening for a few more minutes.
There you go. I think a lot of people probably subconsciously do time boxing, and maybe they're sitting there they're struggling to figure out what it is that their business is missing. And maybe they're not realizing that the time boxing that they're actually doing is what's needed. You know what I mean? Like they have, like, the scheduling going, but they're not realizing that the issues that they're having with the business, maybe they're not time boxing correctly. If that makes sense. Like, sometimes, like, there's, like, you get up in the morning, you do, you have breakfast. That's like the same kind of thing you got going on every day. But some people, by the end of the day, maybe at lunchtime, they're a little hungry. They didn't have breakfast in the morning or something. And, you know what I mean? They're like, you're subconsciously time boxing. It's like paying your bills. You get paid, you pay your bills right away, and then you have some spending money afterwards. That's a form of time boxing, essentially.
What I would say to that is that it's like confusing production with progress.
Sure.
And so like I found for me, again, I'm a work in progress, that I used to, and I know I'm still guilty of this, so I can't even say that I'm like got this part figured out, but we make time for things that are like fun for us. And so, like a good example would be if, hey Sam, I'm one of the rules, I could technically say that I own at Atlas is, I am the financial guy. So if people need some form of like reports on a certain project, I might not be the data administrator, but I'm the one that's got the reports and I have access to all that stuff between, the connections that I have with our team. And if somebody needs like 10 reports because they need to know how we're doing on a certain project or whatever, and if I've got to do that, or hey, one of our operations managers is like, hey man, we need to get a new dump truck because one of ours is getting old and tired, and even though it might be 3 months before we're going to get that dump truck, I will that's fun for me. So like I will like, I got to get these reports, dig into our accounting software, or I can go research a 550 with the landscaper dump on it. I'm going to go ahead and get that done. And it's because that's something that I enjoy doing. So, I think especially with a lot of small businesses, and I know a lot of our followers probably are the smaller businesses where they wear every hat in the business. And there's certain things that we enjoy doing, and so we continue to do them, but then there's certain things that we don't enjoy doing as the roles. Maybe some people like sales, some people would prefer to just deal with the more analytical stuff, but they end up more and more people enjoy doing those fun things. So by nature, when we're working on our delegation processes, we'll delegate out the stuff that we enjoy doing because somebody else has no problem taking that off our plate. But then the things that we don't enjoy doing, we end up keeping because, that's not fun for anybody to do. And, I would love to change that for, most business owners. Like, work on delegating the stuff first that you don't enjoy doing. Because if it's something you don't enjoy doing it, you're never going to do it with purpose. You're never going to do it with passion.
Exactly.
You're never going to do it because you're the best at it. I mean, a prime example would be your role at Atlas. I mean, you are our content creator. In my very humble opinion, you have one of the most fun jobs I think ever.
Absolutely.
And you're amazing at it. But it was something that, prior to having, before we humbly said we could afford to have a Chris on payroll, not everybody can. I loved getting content. But the thought and the process of like editing it and making it into something fun was like, I would rather, I'd rather jump off a bridge than do that. I don't do well sitting. You know how I'm very restless and sitting. So I would have like these Google Drive folders that are just like stacked with all this content, and I never did anything with it. And so, I'm supposed to be the marketing guy because that's a hat that I'm wearing, but I'm not doing anything with the content. And so I'm like, what if we hired a Chris in, and I didn't realize how much somebody else could be so much better than me at it. I thought I had to do it. And dude, it's like one of those roles now where like I couldn't imagine not having somebody like yourself to be able to own that and do your work with excellence. And so those of you that follow us can see like our content. We get so many compliments on it. I'm like, we never got compliments when it was me doing it. Nobody ever gave us a plug for that. So anyway, getting rid of the stuff, or like that's part of the headspace thing. Is like, if it's got to be something that you got to do it because you have to do it, do that stuff in the first part of your day, and then the things that you enjoy doing, end your day with that. That way you can shut the door, with purpose and with stuff that actually, fills your cup. You can't pour from an empty cup. So if you're spending the whole day, putting fires out and dealing with tasks that you don't enjoy doing, because maybe you've got a number 2 or a number 3 that are like taking delegation items off your plate, but they're doing something that you enjoy doing, you'll nitpick them, and it's just not a good. And I apologize for all the nitpicking that I do with you sometimes, but it's all love, man. It's all love. But anyway.
Okay. So a lot of us, including myself, follow you on socials, and you talk, and this ties right in with what we were talking about, potentially anyway. The stuff that you do in the morning time may not be stuff that you want to do later on because it, I don't know, might affect, your ability to get things done.
Yep.
Can you explain your morning routine?
Yeah, that's good.
It's a lot of people want to know.
Yep. So for me, the stuff that I do in the morning is the stuff that I need to be in the right headspace to be able to do. And so there are things that as the day, once the world needs me and needs my time or, has questions or things for me, I'm not going to be in the headspace to deal with situations and do the things that are non-negotiables to me. So, to walk through my non-negotiables of the day, I wake up at 4:30. Monday through Thursday, I give myself a little bit of grace on Fridays, and I do 5 a.m. on Fridays. But Monday through Thursday is 4:30. I get up super, I thought about writing a book one day called Boring My Way. Actually, I'm going to write a book someday, and I'm going to title it Boring My Way to Success. And what I mean by that is, to most people, my morning routine is probably pretty boring because it's the same thing every morning. But you know what? It gets me, as you know, dude, I feel like I've never had a bigger purpose with my life. And I think a lot of it comes from just having that clarity of where God is calling me. But in the morning, 4:30, wake up. Coffee's already brewed. The coffee pot kicks on at 4:25. So at 4:30, I smell it brewing, and I'm up and at 'em bright and early. I am usually on my couch with my first cup of coffee, same spot, same lamp, same dude. If my kids have a sleepover and they're in my spot when I wake up, it totally mind screws. My whole morning is even though I can go to the basement, there's nothing wrong with the basement. There's a comfy couch in the basement. That's not where I go. That's not my spot. Same spot, same lamp, cup of coffee. I usually get I start my morning out with a devotion book. Timothy Keller has a proverb devotion that's basically it's the whole year, and it's dated with a proverb and a devotion for each day. And it's crazy how timely those proverbs have been with a situation that I might be facing. So I start my morning reading that single page devotion. Right from there, I get into the Bible myself. Usually try to read one chapter of whatever book I'm reading. Right now, it's pretty low-hanging fruit for me because I'm reading Proverbs again, which is dude, it's just the book of wisdom. And so read a chapter in the Bible, and then from there, I've got a group. Man, the group keeps getting bigger and bigger. There's probably around 50 men that I literally one by one send a devotion to each morning. It's the same devotion, but basically I take something that I've read that, God speaks to me, you need to put this out into existence. And there's a group of probably around 50 brothers that I build a Devo and I text it to them. And my goal is to have that, usually I dread sometimes sending it because they start responding back. I've really got to be mindful when I hit send. So I usually try to prepare it when I'm just wrapping up my word and I've prayed and I feel where I need to focus my attention at for the day right then and there. I'll get my Devo ready to send, and I do this little quirky thing in my iPhone where I do a star and the word Devo by every person that I send it to, so I can sort it easy to make sure I don't miss anybody. And so I'll usually prep it on the first person, but I don't hit send. So it's ready to go. Because then from there, and it's funny, some of my close friends that know, their response back will be copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. Because they know what I'm doing for the next few minutes. And so I'll get it ready. So now the Devo's ready. It's sat to the side. From that point, I always try to read one chapter of some form of leadership or self-growth book. Right now, I'm reading a book called Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. And dude, it's been a heavy hitter for me. Great book. Total plug for you leaders. I recommend reading that. It was gotten to me as a gift from somebody I spoke at, doing a keynote on making the most of your time. And then this person sent me that book. I'm like, dude, this has been an epic read. So read from there. Usually around 5:40, that Devo's going out. And then it takes about 10 minutes to get them all kicked out. And dude, like I'm usually about 2 cups of coffee deep at this point. I'm usually prepping the pre-workout in the cup at that point. And then I'm trying to leave to get to the gym by like 5:50, 5:55, somewhere right in there. And then one of my non-negotiables that's been the same, my daughter's in 9th grade. Since she was in 1st grade, is I take her to school every day. She does not like riding the bus to school, and that's my daddy-daughter time. So we've had that tradition. So I take her to school. So she's in 9th grade now, so it's a lot earlier. So I'm usually taking her to school by around 6:50. And then literally from 7 a.m. on, it's not like a written thing with our team. But really, I try to just have that mutual respect where I'm not texting anybody anything from our team, anything until after 7 a.m. Like that way, they're in the right headspace to get our team rolling in the morning. I mean, and there's 30-some crews dispatching out of here every day. So they got a lot going on. So like the last thing they need is me, sending them an additional thing. So I try to not be too messagey or sending them emails till after 7 a.m. And there's a reason, obviously there's a reason behind that with Headspace. And then, from that point on, I've done my personal growth stuff. If anything is still to come after that, it's literally, I have a 30-minute drive, whether I'm working from our Novi office or from Flint. I have about a 30-minute drive, and that's my podcast time. So like, I'm going to jump into something that I'm listening to from either going south or north from my home. And after that, whatever part of the day, I'm all in for the world at that point. Like I've literally filled my cup up, and it takes a lot when you've put yourself in that right headspace to kick off your day where you don't have that mindset like you've let yourself down. And I love Hal Elrod has a quote, and I think it might have been his book, that's win the morning, you win the day. And I feel like to get in the right headspace, it starts with the winning morning. And I did a blog called Mind Over Mattress, and I talked all about that morning routine and just getting up. And so many people will like write me and be like, dude, I just can't do it. And how did you do it? I'm like, dude, naturally, I'm not a morning person. Like left to my own demise, dude, I'd sleep till noon. And so you just have to do it. And so anyway, yeah, that starting the morning off with a routine with all the things I know I need to do for me. And so like, when I used to be like, oh, well, I'm going to stop at the gym on the way home. Well, then, the day gets the best of you, and then you don't do it. And now guess what? You end up, landing the plane on your day feeling like you let yourself down. And so, there's all these factors as leaders that are going to hit us throughout the day. So if you do the things that are the non-negotiables for you, do them first thing in the morning and get them out of the way every single day, every day.
That's, excuse me, that is a extremely smart thing to do. It's you have to break habits. That's like one of the big things a lot of people have is breaking habits, and getting up in the morning, very early in the morning, is a habit that a lot of people probably don't have. But doing those like setting small goals like that, that jumpstarts your day. You're way more productive. You're in the right headspace for what you got going on that day. Jocko Willink talks about that all the time. Just create small goals like that, and your day will be better.
That's exactly how, it started for me as just because of the business, I had to be up. But but even then, man, I think back to the crews, our first crews were dispatching out at 7 a.m. Like, for many, many years, I would get to the office. I'd wake up at 6:20, make some coffee or stop and get a coffee on the way in, and be at the office by 6:50. And as soon as you got there, everybody's they're trying to open your flipping truck door for you to ask you questions. Hey, where's this guy going today? And dude, right out of the gate, I felt like my hair was on fire, and the day hadn't even begun yet. And I remembered, when I was trying to pivot into how do I change this? And I think I had read a book or it might have been The Greatness Guide by Robin Sharma. And I think he had talked about that, the power of a morning routine. And so I knew all these people that I wanted to be were doing it. And one of my mentors at the time, he would do a leadership blog every day. And so for those of you that remember, I used to do a leadership blog every day. It's because my mentor would do it and kind of got me turned on to it. But I would get his blogs at 4:50, 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like getting up, and I check my email, and like this guy's already messaging me 2 hours prior, and I'm like, man, it's just I remember going and visiting his business and how much more in control we were. We were probably right around 3 million in revenue then. They were like 14, 15 million in revenue. And I remember visiting him and seeing how much more peaceful their organization was, and thinking to myself, like, that's what I want for us. So I started just emulating all the things that he was doing. And so that kind of started the morning waking up. But the problem that I was doing, and this is a whole nother Headspace thing, was I would wake up and I would go right into those blogs, right into the blogs, right into trying to add value to other people. But I was pouring from an empty cup because I wasn't doing anything for me. Right. And I remembered the pastor of our church, he's a great friend and spiritual mentor of mine, called me out one day. And he goes, man, I swear you can recite like any John Maxwell quote ever. He goes, but read me what's some scripture that you have memorized. And I'm like, it wasn't that I didn't love Jesus. It wasn't that I, wasn't a believer, but I wasn't reading the Bible. I wasn't praying, consistently. And like, I was super like pissed that he called me out like that, but it was so true. And so, shifting, and I remember Brandy, my wife, had said to me one day, she goes, honey, I love you, but man, she's like, you just look depleted. And it was literally because I was waking up, but I was just using the extra couple hours to get more done. And there was no personal growth time. So for those of you that know me, you know that I'm like obsessed with personal growth. That's why, because I've seen the way with all the adversities that we as leaders face, especially, when you've got 100+ team members that are like, 3/4 of them are like wanting more out of life. And then I've got dozens of people that I mentor and coach. And so they're looking at me for guidance and, all the things. I'm going like, I can't continue to help grow others if I'm not growing myself. So having that, win the morning, win the day mindset with proper headspace to kick the day off, it's pretty hard to have a bad day when you've gotten more done before most people wake up. Right. Like you can and on the flip side of that, talk about headspace. When I lay my head down at the pillow at night, bro, 5 minutes and I'm out. Done. Like there's no sleeping medication needed, because I have literally started my day with my wheels turning all day and just getting in that right headspace. So yeah, that's where the morning routine came from, man. And I will happily, I could talk about that whole podcast.
All right. Well, so I guess this carries on with what you were just talking about, but if someone is feeling like they end the day not having accomplished anything, what would you say that they should try doing?
I will start by saying a lot of the times, one, if you didn't listen to the first part of the podcast, go back to when I talked about doing the hard things first.
Yep.
But spinning off to that, a lot of it comes down to, if you've got and people, please don't miss this, if you've got 4 or 5 major tasks that require different focus throughout the day, think about how exhausting it is when you switch from the first item to the second item to the third item. And so even though you may have accomplished a lot, it took you 10 times the energy because you've shifted emotional settings from one thing to the other. And here's what I mean by that. Let's just say, I'll just actually use myself for an example. If a customer still wants to meet with me, as I don't have as many, there was a time when I didn't have as many things on my calendar because we have a great sales team, and so that I don't humbly said have to wear a lot of hats in the business anymore. I would just be like, okay, you want to meet, let's do Tuesday at 1:00. Got it. That's going to be I'm going to meet with a client. Well, Tuesday morning is my morning to go over financials. So where are we at as a team? What's our cash flow like? What's our sales looking like? So I'm in this mindset of like, maybe it's not good right now. Maybe things are, maybe we need to look at, maybe we need some better capital, some more operating cash, whatever it is. But then that afternoon, I'm going to go visit with the customer and try to sell them on a new landscape or being a new maintenance client, whatever. my emotional mindset is going to be thinking about what I looked at in those financials, whether good or bad. And if it was super good and like cash is good, profits are good, bank accounts looking good, I'm going to go into that sale like much more not as hungry, because I'm like, we're going to be busy with or without you. And I will say, I think you should approach every sale like you've got $1 million in the bank, because you never want to be desperate when you go, because desperation makes you stupid. We'll do a whole podcast on that someday.
Yes.
Did that. But, on days when you're looking at tasks like that, the last thing you want to do is to jump into another, like, interviewing employees that afternoon or whatever. My wife is a prime example. She's our human resource manager, and she's got a lot of analytical stuff she has to deal with our health insurance, our HRIS platforms, with compliance. But then we get a walk-in for an applicant, and we're going to give him an interview on the spot, because that's what we do. And she's just coming off of looking at all these mundane tasks that she has to deal with. But then she's got to pivot and go right into like sell mode to why they want to get this person to be on our team. And it's exhausting when you have to pivot that. So if somebody's dealing with those days where you get home and, if you feel like you didn't get anything done, maybe that's true. And that's a whole nother thing you need to look at with the time boxing or doing the hard things first. But I will say, take start with 2 days a week and only allow yourself to pivot. Headspace is maybe once a day. Maybe the morning is one thing. Then you've got, a little time to lunch where you've got to pivot. Maybe you want to jump on social for a sec and veg out for a few minutes. That's okay if it's helping change your mindset into another mode, and then do the other Headspace thing in the afternoon. So like even in the sales world, like we do a lot of outdoor living stuff. What I found is I don't do well getting the data for an estimate on the same time I'm meeting with the client to do the sale, because my passion is going to sell this swimming pool, or my passion is going to sell this patio. And the last thing I want to do is go from this incredible conversation with a family to like, now I've got to bust my level out and my tape measure and get a bunch of data. And that's another day. That's my analytical thinking day. So on the day that I'm selling, that's what I do on those days. Then the other day when I've got to do my estimates and do the typing stuff, I'll try to work from like a coffee shop and go get my measurements. And that's all I'm doing that day. Maybe it's 3 or 4 jobs that I've got to go back and get grades on, whatever. But that's the headspace I'm in for that day. And maybe a lot of people don't have the luxury of being able to like, that's the main hat that they have to wear. So, maybe you do have to do, you find yourself doing 4 or 5 different headspace tasks on the same day. Call in, a client that's upset. So you're the customer service person. You've got to talk to your financial person about, maybe raising some more capital for your business. You're the salesperson, so you got to deal with clients. Oh, you're also the recruiter, so you've got to focus on hiring people. But guess what? You're also the mechanic, so you've got to wrench on your equipment. All of those things require a different headspace, that when you've got to shift from one to the other, it's a good hour of transformation to where your mind is now in the next mode. Well, if you do that 5 times a day, but you don't allow yourself to get into the proper headspace for it, you're going to end the day just mentally tanked, because you're like, it's like driving through rush hour traffic all day. Like you're constantly having to look at the car squeezing in, you're 10 and 2 on the wheel, whatever the case may be. And so going back to it, if you don't have the ability to only get to have to own so many different hats in the business, just maybe you do the maintenance and stuff on your equipment 1 day a week, and that's the day you do that. And that's should be one of your more least mind using days. So like the last thing you should be doing is at 6 o'clock in the morning, doing maintenance on equipment. That's your most creative part of your day. And I hate to say it, but like your waste. Now, if you're a mechanic listening to this, then that's your most creative part of your day. But if you're an entrepreneur or, a leader of hundreds of people like myself, the last thing I want to be doing is doing task in the most creative part of my day. So just using your time and your headspace wisely, man, it can literally change your leadership.
And I've heard, I don't know how much truth there is to it, but when you're trying to do something new, trying to create a new habit, you got to give it at least like 2 weeks. I've heard of this. I don't know if it's true, but it's worked for me in my personal life with my stuff. But so like if you're trying something new and this is a hard habit to break, getting up really late, try it for 2 weeks. Yeah. Just see if it works. Yep. And I think you'd be surprised.
I find it's not funny at all. It's just a reminder. It's a memory thing. But our sales will have one of our sales representatives go to an estimate now for a job that maybe we did another project for a client like 4 or 5 years ago, and they'll go over there to say we did a front landscape for them, and now they want to meet and look at the back, the backyard, and we'll give them an estimate. Our sales rep will give them an estimate, and they'll be like, well, you guys did our front landscape for us, and oh, that's cool, and then they get the quote, and they're like, wow, it's like 4 times what Sam charged me for the front yard. And I look back to it and I'm like, yeah, that was a payroll week. So I'm going out doing sales when emotionally, like, my mind is thinking how broke we are, and maybe we're not going to have money. We don't have money for payroll Friday. So like my goal is I'm going to sell this freaking job. And so like the person that's studying the analytical attribute items of business like finances, if that's your job and you have to study like a profit and loss, I would highly recommend you don't do it on the same day that you sell. Yeah. Like, it's just not two completely different mindsets. And if the one mindset, this is a dangerous thing that can happen, is if the one headspace bleeds its way into the other headspace, that's when we get stupid. And so, we talk about even with you, with the creative role, like when you're editing and making something cool from the content that you just went and shot, you are in a different headspace than you were when you're out there talking to the guys. Because if you're not, they are going to think you are weird. Yeah. Because I've seen you in your mode and you've got your headphones in and you are focused. Yeah. And if you showed up at a job site to film a crew doing that, and they're like, "Why is he not talking right now? He's weird." Yeah. You're editing and creating is much different than your getting of the content. And so that's two different headspaces. So like maybe you've got a day, and we've talked about this, I'm not saying nothing we haven't talked about, but your day of gathering content, maybe it's a morning with an afternoon pivot like we just talked about, or maybe it's a full day's worth, or the day you're going to be in editing mode, that's all you're focused on for that day. And like, man, when we get desperate, we get stupid. So like that's especially as a business owner, man, like those days when, I'm looking at the finances and then I've got to go out and sell, or maybe I'm recruiting on that same day. Like I'm not going to be as in the mode to try to onboard maybe a potentially A player because, he's like, hey, I've got to have, $25 an hour or whatever. And in my mind, I'm going, dude, I just read a P&L and we're not really making that much money. Sorry, man, I can't afford you. But really, like, no, it's how can I afford this person? Because we need these A players on our team. We got to figure it out. But if you're in the headspace of being that's why CFOs don't hire, they don't do the recruiting because that is two different mindsets.
Totally. So, yeah. Well, that about wraps it up right there. If you got anything you want to add?
Dude, I mean, like we could talk about this subject for hours, but like I'll just land the plane with saying people just need to know their limits and just recognize when you're not in the right headspace. And I think your team will respect you more if, they just walk into your office and they're like, hey man, can we talk about this particular situation? They'll respect you more if you're like, it's just not a good time right now. Like I'm not in the right headspace. And we kind of have a non-negotiable, a few of us here on the team that I probably have more conversations with a couple of our directors, but we actually started kind of a credo where after 4 p.m. in the afternoon, we don't have open-ended conversations because, what I find is like, I won't turn off at that point thinking about what we talked about. So, if it's 4:00 and one of our directors like comes by the office and he's like, hey man, we need to start looking at, maybe looking at a route or a piece of equipment or whatever. And if we're not gonna be able to close that conversation that day. We just save it for the next day. So really just recognizing where your limits are and knowing when you need to take a break, take a walk, meditate, pray, and just get back into that proper headspace for what you're going to deal with. But people will respect you more if you're like, it's just not really a good time, versus you trying to talk to them when you're not in the emotional headspace for whatever it is that you're going to talk about.
Yeah, that's where the bad decisions are made. All right. Well, I appreciate your time taking out a busy dude, and but like we said, we have Headspace, and this is how this worked. Worked out great. So thank you for your time. If you want to check us out, myatlasoutdoor.com. You can also check us out on Facebook at search Atlas Outdoors Landscape and Snow Professionals. You'll see all the great content we make, and look forward to the next podcast.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks.
Peace out, brother.
Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you like what you listen to, leave a like. Check out our Facebook page at Atlas Outdoor to see all the great content that we offer concerning our builds, our amazing team, and just the great culture we have. Also, check out www.myatlasoutdoor.com to see the rest of the team, see all the services that we offer, and maybe even get a build done by us. Thanks for tuning in. Till next time.